Welcome to the complete story for Resident Evil. We're going to be going over all the games and the extra bits that make over the Resident Evil chronological plot. We'll be using anything that works in the main series, which includes games, comic books, novels, and crappy side games. We will not be using the plots from the movies, as they are all off on their own and trying to tie in, but they don't tie in, and it's really confusing, and the movies just don't make any sense when you try to put them into the video game. The purpose of this series is to give you enough of the plot so that you can walk into any room and understand chatter about the viruses in Resident Evil. As for the music within the series, we'll be listening to songs from the games, but also the movie soundtrack, as the musical library for Resident Evil is not very vast. Now, if you're aware of the complete story series, then you know what comes next, the disclaimer. As for the first episode of this series, we're going to be giving you guys comments requesting the series. Today's question is, what is your favorite overall Resident Evil game? Your comments will appear in the next episode. Time to disclaim. While I would love to spend time going over hours and hours of the little plot, side plot, and subplots to the Resident Evil games, we just don't have that kind of time. This series is supposed to be a 5-part story series, and this episode is already a prologue, so you can imagine if I tried to hit on every little bit of Resident Evil. What that means is that we're going to give you enough of the plots and information so that you can understand what's going on if you were to pick up a game in the series. If we miss a key plot point in the overall story, that is a mistake. If we omit something, it's probably to keep the story flowing and understandable. So you're more than welcome to tell us down below what we left out, but bear in mind it might have been for a reason. Also, we're going to be going over the key characters here, not the 90th extra partner that pops up randomly in some obscure game in the series. Lastly, for this first episode, if you would like to verify our facts, we're gathering them from our first-hand experience in the games, the general Wikipedia, the Resident Evil Wikipedia, and a great resource we found called projectumbrella.net. This first video is based on the notes you find that basically pop up and they set up a prologue to the entire series. We'll be going into our first game and its gameplay for the actual episode 1. So I hope you enjoy hearing how we got there. Also, I don't give any clear dates because they're different across all the sites I read. This means that it's hard to pinpoint exactly when everything happened, but the juicy bits are here so you understand how everything connects together. Alright, I think that's enough of an intro. Let's get into Resident Evil. The story of Resident Evil doesn't begin with a mansion, but with a single man. Edward Ashford is the 5th head of the aristocratic Ashford family. It was in the 1960s that Edward Ashford was trying to find a way to promote organized evolution within the human body through the use of a virus. He didn't have the ability or the intelligence to complete his goals, though. It was Edward Ashford's son, Alexander Ashford, who, being aware that he didn't have the research ability, began the Code Veronica project in secret. His goal was to create a child genius gifted enough to succeed in his father's research. Years passed after this event until a scientific team led by Edward Ashford, Oswald Spencer, and one other man began exploring islands in Western Africa. It was the other men in this team who discovered a flower that seemingly gave incredible powers once consumed. The theory was that this was possible because it manipulated the DNA of the human body. Through months of searching and testing, they indeed find that this flower is able to alter the DNA for the better. They named the flower the Progenitor flower, and the virus within can change DNA, the Progenitor virus. They immediately returned to the United States, where Alexander Ashford orders a secret lab to be built under his mansion in the Arklay Mountains, outside of Raccoon City. Edward Ashford, happy that his son has found what they've been looking for, returns and joins the research. Years pass, and they are unable to recreate the conditions that allow this flower to turn people into superhumans. They begin to theorize that the flower gains the ability to manipulate DNA from its environment and not the flower itself. Upon completion of the lab underneath the mansion, Spencer invited a man named George Trevor to join them in the mansion. Unaware of what was going on, George Trevor sends his wife and daughter ahead of himself. In desperation, Spencer has his henchmen grab Jessica and Lisa Trevor and drag them into the labs. Spencer decides to use them for early human testing and keep the rest of the facility unaware that they even arrived. By the time George Trevor arrives looking for his family, he is informed by Spencer that his wife and daughter left urgently to visit a sick relative. Meanwhile, in the lab, Jessica dies from the effects of the Progenitor virus. Lisa begins to slowly go insane due to its effects, and somehow manages to survive. George Trevor at this time is finally captured and imprisoned in the mansion down below. As time progresses, George Trevor does escape, but he is then used by Spencer to test the mansion's traps and eventually dies of starvation, lost forever. Spencer, now going by the name Lord Spencer, is happy with the initial testing of the mansion and the virus. Edward Ashford isn't even aware that this human testing has started. In the late 60s, a new pharmaceutical company called Umbrella Pharmaceuticals was started to hide their further testing of this virus. As testing stateside had been a failure, a team was sent back to continue testing in Africa. In the late 60s, Edward Ashford contracts and dies from the progenitor virus. His death was arranged by Spencer. This places Alexander Ashford as the head of the Ashford family. As years passed, multiple facilities and homes are built in the name of Umbrella. In the early 70s, the Code Veronica project that Alexander Ashford started so long ago finally finishes. Alfred and Alexia Ashford are born due to this. Almost another year passes as testing of the progenitor virus continues. Albert Wesker and William Birkin join the Umbrella organization as gifted and young scientists. Eventually, back in the African lab, it is discovered by combining the progenitor virus with leech DNA that it will merge with human DNA as well. These studies were conducted by a man named James Marcus, and he becomes increasingly obsessed with these leeches and their combining of DNA powers. This version of the virus is officially dubbed the Tyrant virus, or T-virus for short. Marcus continues his studies until he accidentally starts to give the T-virus to fellow researchers who just get too close to his leeches. Eventually, Albert Wesker and William Birkin both steal the T-virus research and assassinate James Marcus under the orders of Spencer. Little do they know, though, one of Marcus's leeches entered his body upon his death. It will spend at least a decade bonding with his DNA, so we'll come back to that later. Wesker and Birkin become the head of the facility in the mountains as a reward for their work from Spencer. All credit for the creation of the T-virus was given to William Birkin. They are quickly taken to the central laboratory where they discover a woman who has been experimented on for at least 11 years. This gives both Wesker and Birkin ideas for how to develop the virus further. Her name was Lisa Trevor. Meanwhile, Alfred and Alexia Ashford at a young age began testing the progenitor virus. They combine it with plant DNA and an ancient virus that they found in a queen ant. They dubbed the first virus the T. Veronica virus. William Birkin becomes increasingly jealous of the twins and is rushed to complete a bioorganic weapon, or BOW as it's called. Realizing how unstable Birkin has become, Alexia has the project placed on hold for fear of what his rushed experiments would become. The result of his experiments are codenamed the Hunters. Alfred, during all of this, discovers that the Code Veronica project and discovers exactly what his sister and himself really are and how they're linked to the project. Enraged by this, his sister and him decide to enact their revenge on their father, Alexander Ashford. They inject him with the T. Veronica virus just to see the results. He quickly mutates into an unintelligible monster and needs to be contained in the basement of their home. Realizing that the reason this happened is because his body couldn't adapt fast enough, Alexia devises a plan to freeze herself for 15 years. Doing so will allow her to slowly adapt to the virus and gain its true powers. To keep all of this a secret, Alfred declares that his sister and his father have both died. With no other source of the T. Veronica virus around, Umbrella declares this a lost virus and moves forward. William Birkin begins to act normally again, hearing that Alexia has died, and moves forward with his own research. Albert Wesker, on the other hand, doesn't believe it and has heard rumors of her trying to test the virus on herself. He begins to become suspicious of the intentions of the Ashfords and Spencers and questions their true motives. In the late 80s, both the Nemesis Project and the Tyrant Project are started. All research from the T-virus is moved to William Birkin, and he's allowed to move forward with the Tyrant Project. But the problem is, they can't find a suitable test subject. There is only a 1 in 10 millionth chance that a human can complete the changes needed to get their DNA to become a tyrant. Due to this, Albert Wesker decides to join the research on the Nemesis Project and has the leeches that can cause a change sent to the mansion outside of Raccoon City. He tries to place them into Lisa Trevor, the test subject who is going on 20 years of exposure to the progenitor virus. But as the leech got close, it was absorbed and vanished inside of her. Due to this, William Birkin discovers a change in her DNA, which leads to the start of the G-Virus research. More years and more research continue. During this time, more labs are built underneath Raccoon City, and the T-Virus is being sold off to a drug lord by an unnamed researcher. The drug lord is named Javier and uses the T-Virus to try and cure the cancer inside of his wife's body. While it works, she doesn't regain consciousness. Eventually, the virus runs out of control and she transforms into a monster. Due to this, Javier moves her to a secret facility and finds it obviously difficult to trust outsiders. He starts his own virus project and calls it Code Remnants. It is at this time that an ex-Soviet Union soldier named Sergei volunteers to be tested on for the Tyrant Project. He's discovered to be the 1 in 10 millionth person who can be changed into a tyrant, and they clone his DNA for further testing. He gives the Umbrella Corporation 10 clones in exchange for being made an executive within the company. He then starts up a private militia within Umbrella to ensure that Umbrella's assets are handled properly by assisting local law enforcement and leading their own personal tactical missions. Over the next few years, several Umbrella tactical members are recruited. This includes Hunk, Carlos, Mikhail, and Nikolai. At this time, Ada Wong enters the picture, working as a spy for an opposing organization. She infiltrates the mansion outside of Raccoon City and poses as a girlfriend to one of the scientists. At this point, Albert Wesker is growing overly suspicious of Spencer's true motives. To try and find out more about Umbrella's true motives, he resigns as the head of the Raccoon City Mansion Labs. He then takes a position within the Umbrella Intelligence Agency and becomes proficient in marksmanship and hand-to-hand combat. William Birkin transfers his G-Virus research to the labs outside of Raccoon City. Brian Irons begins to take bribes to handle illegal activities for William Birkin and keep them hidden in the name of Umbrella. Meanwhile, Alfred Ashford finally graduates and begins to take control of various activities within Umbrella. Cancer patients start popping up in Raccoon City, and one of the Umbrella scientists decides to begin using them as human test subjects for trials with the T-Virus. He begins to administer the T-Virus as an experimental cancer cure. The subjects all begin to feel better, but then they grow hungrier until the point of death. They then revive in a zombified state, actually creating an incident involving zombies in the hospital. The Raccoon City Police Department has the hospital shut down, and the entire incident is covered up by Umbrella. Umbrella then begins to fund a special task force outside of Raccoon City. It is dubbed STARS, and Albert Wesker is placed in charge with a fabricated military record. At this time, the scientist who actually invented the T-Virus, Marcus, who died creating his ultimate creation, the Queen Leech, when he was assassinated by Wesker and Birkin, was finally reviving. You see, the leech entered his body and bonded with his creator's DNA for the last 10 years. It emerges and seeks revenge on all those in Umbrella who had a hand in its creator's death. This is where things truly begin. On May 11th, 1998, the Queen Leech version of James Marcus attacks the facility underneath Raccoon City, infecting everyone inside with the T-Virus. Things begin to spiral out of control, and the entire facility is lost to Umbrella as zombies are killing everyone inside. The few survivors try to hold up as best as they can, but Umbrella mostly ignores the situation, at first hoping that it will just resolve itself. The zombies one by one begin to creep out into Raccoon City proper, causing single deaths here and there. Raccoon City begins to get suspicious of the mysterious deaths happening in the area, and on July 9th, The Raccoon City states its public intention to send in stars to investigate the situation at the Mountainside Manor near Raccoon City. It is here that the first game in the chronological order takes place, with Stars Team Bravo being sent in to investigate the situation. And this is where Resident Evil 0 takes place. But you're gonna have to wait until we finish the last part of Zelda before we come back to give you the official Resident Evil Part 1. This part is just a prologue because since there was no game footage, I didn't want to call this Part 1. Part 1 will have game footage from Resident Evil 0 and all the other games we cover. Thank you for joining us, and we'll be back here on Friday with the final part of Zelda. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and subscribe to the channel.